Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, and hey, welcome to this Black Clover catch-up video. We are talking about chapter 182, and what a chapter to come back on just for these videos. So, I think the last video that we had here was back when this arc started with all the elves being reincarnated. After that, we had a lot of fights, which, while interesting, it was really hard to talk about each individual chapter just because the fights are really simple and there's not much progression. Reading through the chapters, I realized that, yeah, Black Clover is it's a very simplistic series. And not much happens aside from cool little things, but in terms of like plot development, it's pretty stagnant when it's coming to those battle chapters aside from this person beating this person or this person getting this power. And mind you, Black Clover does do a good job in making all of that really cool. But in terms of making a video, I feel really cheap making a 5-minute discussion because that's a lot of times what it's worth unless you're going into the theory area. That is very different from this chapter because this chapter was pretty amazing. Mind you, I don't think it's... Well, actually, let's preface this properly. The chapters with the villains, when you're seeing all of them talk with each other, are always very interesting. And compared to when this whole thing started, I think I still like those initial chapters a bit more than this one, but this is still really good, especially with the last couple of weeks of just non-stop fighting. This was one of the first chapters that I took quite a few times just reading over just to make sure I understood everything because there was quite a bit of terminology being thrown around in there. So I'm really into it. I'm really into it. It reminds me that this author is really good at making complex stories. Or not complex stories, but he's really good at adding detail to things. Like his previous series, Hungry Joker, that series was fairly detailed with how it worked in, well, at least when it came into the powers and into the circumstances. And so it's cool to see that kind of shade of complication here. Because with this situation, you have a new system being thrown in here. You have like the whole followers of Sephiroth. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We have like that whole new system, so a subsect within the elves. So you could assume that the author is kind of setting up, okay, like within these really powerful elves, there's this other powerful group which the characters can work towards, and that's like, okay, cool. I can take that. And it's cool to establish that these guys have like messages from their gods. It's cool to establish why they're important. I'm really into it. Before that, you also have some excellent characterization and character interaction going on between Veto and Fauna along with Liar there. So also really good. That was a great way to start it. I do actually care a lot about Liar and his friends, and it is really interesting to see Fauna here without her being so angry. It's really funny too because I just watched the current Black Clover episode, and that Black Clover episode was her being angry all the time. So that part also was a really good start to the whole thing, and it introduced some ideas there, and it also set up Sally to get her comeuppance. It was actually really funny that how the author worked that in there. Now that Sally's showing up at the end of the chapter, I am excited to see what kind of interactions or what kind of rhetoric's going to come out when it comes to her, just her talking, because she's pretty much going to see the results of her previous experiments in the flesh here with Fana and Veto. Along the way, we also got some clarification on the salamander, and again, it's cool to see these things being fleshed out. And again, along the way to that first little bit reveal of the Sephiroth, we had the bit of information that the real Lich is not fully there yet. So, and that's just in the first, what, 6 to 7 pages. That kind of information density is always going to be worthwhile to read, so I was absolutely enjoying that. And you know, they also threw in a little bit of a joke there about Fana being naked, but whatever. Now, going back to that whole page with the followers of Sephiroth, one thing to keep in mind here is that there's supposed to be 10 of those elves, and one of them is missing, who we can assume is Yuno, right? When you look at that first page, if you look to the right of Lich, you'll see that there's an empty spot. So one thing to note there is that it's very interesting that they can do this without all of them being there, that they can start opening up the way to the Shadow Kingdom. And it's kind of concerning because that's putting us on a path where, in terms of the narrative, Yuno's going to end up being captured by these people. and working in part of it. But I do wonder if Yuno's absence in this ritual actually makes a difference, and maybe we'll see that being a reason as to why things slow down later. Now, as we go through, we also have that information about the Shadow Kingdom being dropped, and I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty cool visual. Like the visual of the Shadow Kingdom castle, man, that I really like this kind of look for towns, this kind of like storybook pop-out book feel. I love the art for it, so I'm kind of biased in that regard, but I found the visuals so cool. I think that it's not the silhouette of the actual castle. I do think that's a different castle, but you guys clarify if I'm wrong. Still, it's a really cool image. I absolutely loved it. And one thing that you can talk about when you have this castle here is that they're calling it the Kingdom of Shadows, right? So you gotta wonder, okay, when the elves get sorted out, is this the next kind of stage? Are we going into like fighting the Shadow Kingdom? That'd be really interesting, and that gives us something new to deal with after this is over, if the author wants to go that far. So I like the whole lore. I like that info dump. The way it's being dumped makes me feel like this is the next stage that the story could potentially go into, although I am wondering if the Kingdom of Shadows is just another name for hell, because at one point the elves point out that they want to do the full reincarnation and switch out the souls that they have and send those to hell. And so if the Shadow Kingdom is the metaphor for hell, I'm going to be kind of disappointed, because the way that it's looking right now, it seems like this is a parallel dimension, and I would love to see what the author could do with that kind of addition to his lore. Now, one of the final things that we have in this chapter are Asta's group finally bursting through, and that panel in particular, it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty awesome panel. You get to see the characters coming in and you get to see all of them yelling. I kind of like how the author worked in their faces. Really neat, really neat. Anyway, by the end of this chapter, what I'm left wondering really, at the end of the day, aside from the stuff with the Kingdom of Shadows, is really just Yuno. That's what I'm the most concerned about in all of this. Because at one point they say that they need this final magic stone and it's in the castle, but the silhouette that shows up when they're talking about it is the silhouette of Yuno and his necklace. So I'm just concerned about where exactly things are going for him. I want to know how exactly Yuno factors into this whole situation, and I want to see how they're going to try and get him back onto the elf side. Overall, we're going into a situation where it looks like it's going to be an all-out battle, and I do hope that we get some pretty good one-on-ones here. But I do hope that we start delving more into the nature of why people are the way they are. You know, we had something really cool here when you had talking about the salamander going to pick another host when Fana was gone. You had a good little bit of a talk there when they were talking about Yuno being so peculiar. You had another good talk about Lich not being all there. I wanna keep going into this direction of understanding why the elves are acting the way they do, or like what do they know that our characters don't know yet. And I want to get more of these clarifications, like why Yuno in particular is so special. How did he end up with the stone? You know, just the little details. I want to get more little details. But overall, I'm very excited. This was really cool. Really cool. I do think that the drop of the new lore is kind of, you know, it's kind of last minute. It's all of a sudden just comes out. I would not have imagined that there was that system within the elves, but I'll accept it. I think the Kingdom of Shadows is possibly new territory that will be pretty cool to see get fleshed out in the future as well. So overall, the last couple of Black Clover, the last chapters of Black Clover have been really fun, because, you know, fighting and a lot of people getting power-ups, that's always going to be fun at some level. But this chapter was really cool because it just adds in some structure and gives you an idea of where things could be going in the future, and that's always appreciated. Anyway, yeah, let me know what you thought down below about this chapter, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. And if next week's chapter is as info heavy as this one, then I'll probably make a video for it. It's really just worthwhile things to talk about.